So let's go over some of the basics of Java. Um, Typically when you see people writing Java online or in YouTube, they're using what's called an integrated development environment. That's a big fancy word for something that just helps you out writing a Java code. And you'll see them use Eclipse, you'll see videos of NetBeans, IntelliJ IDEA, Oracle. Everyone has their own preferences. But the truth is, basic Java, you don't really need any of these. And you can learn it without it. Um, Basic Java can actually be done on the command line using two different commands. One's called javac, which is the compiler, other's Java, which is actually the virtual machine that runs your application. Javac has the job of taking your .java files, which by the way is your source code, compiling those into class files, which is the bytecode that Java needs to run. It can then be run with the Java application, which will basically start up a virtual machine. It'll load all the necessary classes or the classes that you tell it, and then it'll run your application. But in order to really see this in action, we need to take a look at it from the command line. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so for our example, all we're going to do is create a Hello World application. And it's just going to be a simple application. All it's going to do is whenever we run it, it's just going to print Hello World out on the screen. Nothing too dramatic, right? We're going to use the two commands that we just saw there. Plus one I'm going to show you as a little hack so that you can actually see the bytecode of your application. But first let's create an actual class file or a Java file. You'll actually see that I'm here in a directory with absolutely nothing in it. Okay, that's a good place to start as any. And I'm going to use Vim, but you can use whatever editor you would like. The important part here is to create a file that ends in .java. That basically tells the operating system that this is a Java source file, and try to find an IDE or something else that will help you edit it. It also, it's important as a visual cue to let you know that this actually contains source code. It's not the compiled output, right? But real quick, we'll just make a real quick Hello World class. Don't get too caught up in what I'm actually typing right now. It's basically something we're going to cover later, further down the road when we get into OOP. But just know that I'm creating a simple class that really doesn't do a whole lot, but it does have a main method in it. And main methods are pretty important because this is what's actually going to get ran whenever I tell the application to execute. And in our case, we're just going to print Hello World out to the command line. Now, if we save our file and we look in our directory, now we have a hello world.java file just sitting out there. And this is our Java source code. And just like you saw in the previous slides, if I actually type javac and tell it the name of my source file, it'll end up creating a .class file for me. Now, this .class file is not going to look like a whole lot if you open it up in the editor. As a matter of fact, it's going to look like a bunch of gibberish. It's because it's a compiled bytecode file. We can look at it though, and we'll use a real quick hack here to use the javaP command, just so that I can show you there actually is bytecode inside this file. So here's the bytecode that was compiled from this file. And you can see it's definitely something that we don't ever want to have to write by hand. Okay, so back on track, we know we now have a bytecode file and we can run it using the Java command. Now the Java command will essentially launch a virtual machine, load up whatever classes it needs to, and try to find a class called Hello World, which I'm telling it to find, and then run the main method from within that class. And if everything works correctly, we get Hello World printed out to the outside of the console. Now you may ask yourself at this point, how did Java know to load up that class file? And the answer to that is, well, by default, Java looks in the directory that you're running it in for any files that it finds with .class at the end of them. It'll then load those into memory, and then as it goes further along, I actually told it to try to find a class called Hello World and execute it. So because it had already loaded up Hello World.class into memory, it knew exactly what I wanted, and it jumped right into the main application. Now it does this through what's called a class path. A class path is just a fancy term for this is where I'm going to look for .class files. And there can be more than one place. By default, it's always looking at the directory you're in, which is a very much equivalent to typing something like this. Hey Java, look in the class path of the directory we're in and find a class called Hello World and run it. And you can actually see this a little bit better if I was just to back out of the directory that I was in and try to do this again. So you can see right now that I'm actually in a tutorials Java directory. If I back out one level and I actually try to run hello world, you'll see that an exception will get thrown. And it'll tell me that, hey, I can't find this class that you asked me to find called hello world. And that's because the class loader didn't even know where to, it was looking in the directory I was in, but nothing was in there that matched that class definition. So since it's one level up in the Java directory, I can tell it to also look up there and then run hello world, and it'll actually run. So Classpath is something that's going to become very important later, especially if you start writing launchers or command line based applications that are going to run your Java files. You'll need to tell it where to look for all the class files that are needed to run. Otherwise, you'll get that notorious no class definition error file or filed. Yeah, you'll get the error filed on you. Now, the exception will actually come up on your screen, and you'll see that you can't go any further. But this is essentially how easy it is to deal with Java on the command line. It can get a little complicated when we get into namespaces and some other advanced things. But for most of the tutorials, if you just want to write a single Java file, compile it, and watch it run, this is the easiest way to do it. And you can use whatever editor you want to get that done. Now, when you get into managing 10, 20, 30, maybe even hundreds of Java class files and other libraries, an IDE really helps out a lot. But now you know.